Gale loses. Simple as that.
They say Gus Fring was the smartest man in Breaking Bad. Here's the moment that proved he wasn't. Why would Gustavo Fring jeopardize his empire for a 3% bump in meth purity? On paper, the decision looks absurd.
Mr. Fring, I can guarantee you a purity of 96%.
He had Gale, an accomplished chemist, loyal, cautious, and already producing a purity of 96%. The super lab was operational, the infrastructure solid, the money guaranteed. All Gus had to do was keep the operation quiet and consistent. Instead, he invited chaos into his house by bringing in Walter White, a volatile high school teacher with terminal cancer and the temperament of a powder keg.
However, this other product is 99.
And for what? 3%. At least, that's how it seems.
What I produce is 99.1%.
The reality is that the 3% wasn't cosmetic. It represented a microscopic impurity gap with exponential consequences at scale. Walt's 99.8% purity wasn't just slightly better than Gale's 96%. In scientific terms, it was a 20-fold difference in impurity. Over hundreds of pounds of meth produced weekly, that margin translated into millions in profits, and, more importantly, an unmatched product brand.
His is the best I've ever seen.
It wasn't about satisfying addicts, who would have bought Gale's 96% with the same enthusiasm. It was about Gus's obsession. Being the best, owning the best, presenting the best. This obsession wasn't confined to meth. It bled into every corner of his life.
Somebody somewhere is running one tight ship.
His chicken restaurants were spotless and impeccably run. He lectured employees about cleanliness, forced them to re-scrub already gleaming fryers, and dressed with the meticulous grooming of a man allergic to disorder. For Gus, perfection wasn't preference, it was compulsion. And like every compulsion in Breaking Bad, it became a fatal flaw. Walt had pride, Tuco had rage, Gus had perfectionism, and it killed him. His hunger for flawless product blinded him to Walt's volatility, then later to Jesse's.
It's an old folks' home off Paseo del Norte. Our boy tells me Frank took him there.
His need for perfect revenge against Hector Salamanca went beyond reason, transforming a pragmatic businessman into a man possessed. Torture wasn't enough. Death wasn't enough. He required total annihilation.
So Hector Salamanca killed Frank.
And that obsession walked him straight into his own destruction.
But, that last 3%.
Yes, Gale himself admitted it. It makes a big difference, those extra 3%. He meant it as a scientist. For Gus, it meant something else entirely. It wasn't just chemistry, it was identity. He couldn't resist Walt's 99.8% purity any more than he could resist a perfectly ironed shirt. The same compulsion that built his empire also dug his grave. They told you Walter White was the scary one. They were wrong. It was Jesse Pinkman all along.
I'm going. Hey, what's going on?
Jesse Pinkman is not, on the surface, the sort of man who inspires fear. His puppy-eyed face, fumbling insecurities, and habit of being manipulated by nearly every character in Breaking Bad hardly scream menace.
I killed her.
In the early years, he was less a hardened criminal than a lost boy who stumbled into an empire far too brutal for his temperament. Yet by the time El Camino arrives, the transformation is unmistakable. Jesse has become someone who, whether or not he seeks it, radiates danger.
Right, so who's got keys?
Consider the El Camino standoff. The simple demand, who's got the keys, followed by the curt, sharp, keys,
scumbag,
lands like a gunshot. The room freezes, not because Jesse Pinkman carries the gravitas of a mob boss, but because his audience has just watched him kill two men in cold blood.
But I'd shoot him again tomorrow.
They aren't intimidated by reputation. They are staring at a man who has proven, moments earlier, that he can and will pull the trigger without hesitation. That makes him terrifying in a way no mythologized blowfish persona ever could. By the end of the series, Jesse's resume is damning enough. He has killed, robbed trains, and outlasted one of the most violent criminal enterprises in the country. To the average person, and even to many in the underworld, that history alone would mark him as intimidating. Yet what makes him especially unnerving in El Camino is not just his past, but his present condition.
Ain't got enough time for you, man. All gone.
He is a shattered man with nothing left to lose, and unpredictability has always been the scariest quality in any opponent. Still, Jesse's menace is situational, not intrinsic. Those who knew him intimately understood that he was not a predator by nature.
Imagine these two guys had Patrick working as a mule.
His violence was reactive, often reluctant, and nearly always accompanied by guilt. He wept after killing Gale. He hesitated when faced with choices that others in his world took in stride. In another life, he might have thrived as a sensitive artist, an eccentric who collected bugs and shielded children from harm. His sweetness was not erased by his crimes. It was buried under them. That duality explains why Jesse can be both terrifying and harmless, depending on perspective. To strangers, he is the outlaw of legend, the man who gunned down rivals like Billy the Kid. To those who truly knew him, he was the man least likely to harm without reason, more likely to collapse under grief than revel in conquest.
Well, my name is Skylar White, yo.
Skylar White, trespassing in his house while pregnant, was safer with Jesse than she would have been with almost anyone else in that world. A detail that underscores his humanity, even at his darkest. So was Jesse Pinkman scary? Only in the way tragedy itself is scary. He is not Tuco, nor Crazy 8, nor any of the true predators who revel in violence. He is instead the cautionary figure, proof that even a fundamentally gentle soul, once trapped in the machinery of crime and trauma, can become someone others fear. In El Camino, the fear is deserved, not because Jesse ever aspired to be terrifying, but because survival left him no choice. Walter White wasn't trapped. He chose the car wash. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. How does a man as proud and talented as Walter White end up scrubbing cars after school hours? On paper, he should have been a professor, a researcher, or at the very least earning a salary commensurate with his brilliance. Instead, he resigned himself to a modest high school teaching job.
Make those tires shine, huh?
And the humiliation of a part-time gig at a car wash. For a man so consumed by pride, this arrangement seems contradictory. Most people with such a fierce sense of dignity either refuse degrading work outright or channel their energy into clawing their way up.
I have cancer.
Walter did neither, until cancer and Jesse Pinkman forced him out of complacency. At first glance, the explanation seems to be comfort zone.
But I prefer to see it as the study of change.
Walt genuinely enjoyed teaching chemistry. His face lit up whenever he could explain a concept, whether to his students, Jesse, or anyone else within reach.
Is this going to be on the midterm?
Yet that passion was undercut by resentment at his students' apathy. He loved the act of teaching, but despised the audience. Which raises the obvious question, why not pursue academia?
Did you learn nothing from my chemistry class?
No.
The answer lies in the ego and control. A university career would have surrounded him with equals, other chemists as sharp or sharper than himself. Walter's fragile pride couldn't bear the prospect of no longer being the smartest man in the room.
Shit you cook.
High school, by contrast, guaranteed superiority. He could bask in the illusion of intellectual dominance without ever being seriously challenged.
We will produce a chemically pure and stable product.
The same instinct explains why he thrived in the meth trade. There, the competition was laughably underqualified.
And what did I say, man? This guy can cook!
Among criminals, his genius made him untouchable. Among scholars, he would have been merely another name on a faculty list. Control is the thread that ties his life together. It is why he left Gretchen, who came from wealth, and married Skylar, who had been a waitress. With Skylar, he could dictate the terms.
Gale loses. Simple as that.
It is why he sabotaged Gale to keep Jesse as his partner. Jesse, unlike Gale, could be dominated. Walter's professional stagnation was not laziness, it was strategy. He designed his life to remain the unchallenged center of gravity, even if it meant mediocrity.
I am the one who knocks.
Ironically, the diagnosis that stripped him of control, cancer, also unlocked his craving for absolute dominance.
So you're the boss now.
Teaching no longer satisfied him. The car wash no longer humbled him. Meth gave him power, fear, and recognition. What began as survival quickly metastasized into an obsession.
I'm the bad guy.
Walt, once a doormat, became the monster he always denied living inside him. His pride was never about dignity. It was about control. And once he had tasted the kind offered by Heisenberg, he never gave it back. Breaking Bad's most terrifying villain wasn't Gus or the cartel. It was Walt in his own living room.
Walt, what did that phone call mean?
By the final season of Breaking Bad, Walter White is no longer the desperate chemistry teacher clawing for survival. He has become something far uglier.
This family is everything.
His cruelty is not confined to rival dealers or unsuspecting victims. It seeps into his marriage with surgical precision.
No. I'm staying. End of story.
Watching Skylar in those episodes is less entertainment and more an exercise in suffocation. Walt doesn't simply intimidate. He delights in reminding Skylar how powerless she is. The man who once played the part of protective husband evolves into an abuser, who thrives on flexing dominance over the one person who sees him most clearly.
For the cancer to come back.
The result is a transformation of Skylar herself, from a sharp, resistant partner into a ghost, a terrified shell bound by fear and manipulation. One of the most harrowing sequences comes when Walt kidnaps their infant daughter, Holly. It's a moment that strips away any remaining illusions about his character.
Walt, please just hear me out.
The horror is not in the theatrics of the crime world, but in the quiet devastation of domestic life shattered. Anna Gunn delivers this collapse with staggering precision. Her performance matches Bryan Cranston's in intensity, if not in spectacle, embodying the raw terror and disgust of a woman trapped with a man she can no longer control. What makes Walt's descent particularly chilling is not simply the violence, but the way Skylar experiences it. When he corners her about sending the children away, the scene is almost unbearable in its realism. The tension is suffocating. The abuse is psychological as much as it is physical. Skylar's journey becomes one of erosion, each episode scraping away the woman she once was. She is reduced not by accident, but by design, broken down by Walt's calculated need to dominate.
Walt is actually at work today.
The tragedy is not only in her entrapment, but in the fleeting moments when she defends him, as if survival demanded complicity.
It's a domestic issue.
In the end, Breaking Bad makes clear that the true terror of Walter White is not found in cartel wars or meth labs, but in his own home.
Someone has to protect this family from the man who...
Skylar's slow unraveling transforms the story from a crime drama into something even darker. An unflinching portrayal of domestic abuse disguised as empire building. They say no episode of television is perfect. Ozymandias proves them wrong. Ozymandias is not simply an episode of Breaking Bad. It is television's equivalent of a cultural earthquake. In 50 minutes, the series distills years of character study, hubris, and inevitability into one of the most haunting hours ever aired. The structure itself is merciless.
Yo, so what's next?
It begins with a flashback to Walt and Jesse's first cook, a scene soaked in bitter irony.
You know, I was thinking about what you asked me the other night.
Walt calls Skylar, spins his first harmless lie, and she believes him without hesitation. That moment of domestic normalcy feels almost quaint when contrasted against the wasteland of betrayal and blood that follows. It's a cruel reminder. Every empire has a day one, and every empire crumbles.
Who the hell is this? Tribal police?
Then the desert erupts. The gunfight doesn't explode onto the screen. It creeps in, like rot.
Nothing can change what just happened.
Hank's fate is not drawn out with false suspense. It is stark, final, and devastating, leaving Walt a broken man begging for a reprieve that never comes. From there, the narrative hurtles forward without mercy.
I watched Jane die.
Walt's betrayal of Jesse, his family's unraveling, and that infamous phone call to Skylar, half performance, half self-justification, and entirely chilling. The episode achieves the impossible. It feels both relentless and fleeting, as though the entire ordeal lasts no longer than 15 minutes.
Confirming the abduction.
Every beat is loaded with consequence. Every frame is charged with finality. What began years earlier with two men in a beat-up RV cooking meth finds its true, inevitable endpoint. In the desert, under a blazing sun, with the Heisenberg myth disintegrating in real time. To call Ozymandias the finest episode of television ever made is not hyperbole, it is understatement. This is not just a highlight of a single series, it stands as one of humanity's great achievements in entertainment. Few works of art can leave viewers staring at the screen in shock, struggling to process what they've just witnessed. Ozymandias does so effortlessly, and with venom. The legacy of this episode is simple. It is the moment Breaking Bad stops being a crime drama and becomes a tragedy written in fire. Walter White never loved his family. Not Skylar, not Junior. The myth of family first is the biggest lie in Breaking Bad. Walter White was never the family man he pretended to be.
You don't live here anymore.
He loved the idea of a family far more than the actual people in it. His relationship with Skylar veered from manipulative to nearly violent. He mistakenly called his own son by Jesse's name.
The methylamine keeps flowing no matter what.
He repeatedly endangered everyone around him, not out of love, but out of obsession with control and the hollow preservation of a family unit that existed mostly in his head.
His name is Hank.
The argument that Walt cared for Hank is flimsy at best. His distress at Hank's fate was less about Hank's suffering and more about the consequences it created for himself. The point of no return he could no longer deny. When Walt did show genuine selfless action, it was rarely for his wife or children. The one person he repeatedly risked himself for, with no clear ego boost attached, was Jesse.
I don't think...
On my son's 18th birthday, which is 10 months.
He didn't need to save Jesse and Felina, but he did. That choice stands apart from the otherwise transactional nature of his so-called affection. Skylar never received anything close to genuine love. Only cold confessions.
I have to say, Walt.
Calculated apologies, and obligatory gestures. Holly, however, was different. With her, Walt's joy looked authentic. Perhaps because she was the only person who demanded nothing of him. Loving Holly did nothing for his pride or empire. It was simply love, stripped of performance. It was the one shred of purity left in him.
Oh, Mr. White. Yes, I remember him.
As for Jesse, Walt's role as teacher never truly vanished. Despite their abusive partnership, Jesse's mother once noted that Walt had always seen potential in him and tried to push him toward better things. This mentorship was twisted, but it existed nonetheless. Of course, defenders argue otherwise. They point to Walt's manipulation of Gretchen and Elliot to ensure his money reached his family, or to the fortune he offered up in an attempt to save Hank's life. They cite his willingness to shield Skylar, Junior, Marie, and Holly at all costs. But such gestures were not consistent patterns of love. They were desperate situational choices.
Hey, I just wanted to say I liked your idea.
When it came to Jesse, Walt was at times cruel enough to fire him, willing enough to let him die, and frustrated by his shortcomings. And yet, even then, he was the only person Walt ever allowed into his inner orbit with something resembling sincerity. In the end, Walt's affections were less about love than about power, image, and obligation. The only exceptions, the fleeting happiness with Holly and the last-minute redemption for Jesse, reveal just how rarely Walter White's love was ever genuine. Heisenberg built an empire. You can build this channel. Subscribe.